Hello, my name is Stan Lippin from Pure UVC. In this recording, we'll be investigating the new FDA regulations on utilizing UVC disinfection technology for treating coronavirus. We'll also dive into the New York State Department of Education's guidelines for utilizing this technology in public schools, which were published as a direct response to the FDA's new guidelines and regulations. From our experience working with school districts across the United States, we know that some administrators and some states have been a little bit skittish in terms of recommending this technology just because it is, let's say, non-traditional in the sense of comparison to chemical disinfectants. Now that enough time has elapsed and enough research has shown the efficacy of this technology against the SARS-CoV-2 viral strain that responsible for COVID-19, school districts are starting to accept this technology in a much wider spread than ever before. This is technology that we've introduced much earlier on in this process, and we're happy that research, governmental groups, Department of Education are getting behind this game-changing technology. So what we'll do is very simple. We're going to go through the guidelines themselves, and I'll be reading a little bit and speaking a little bit more to the technology and to what is meant by these regulations and these guidelines. So let's dive right on in. So right here, if you look in the comments, you'll find the direct link. This is UV lights and lamps, ultraviolet C, radiation, disinfection, and coronavirus, which was published just shy of 2 weeks ago. So right away here, can UVC lamps inactivate the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus? So UVC radiation is a known disinfectant for air, water, and non-porous surfaces. UVC radiation has effectively been used for decades to reduce the spread of bacteria such as tuberculosis. For this reason, UVC lamps are often called germicidal lamps. So this is an understatement here. UVC technology has been used for more than 100 years, and not just against bacteria, but against viral strains, mold spores, and other pathogens. So when they say germicidal, UVC is actually very unique in that it does treat against a wide array of pathogens. One thing that this means is that UVC is a future-ready technology. It's been used, as shown here, against the bacterial strain that causes tuberculosis, as well as many others. It'll be effective against the SARS-CoV-2. It'll be effective against flu strains, cold strains, and many other diseases as well, making this a technology that's going to be very effective at protecting facilities now in the time of coronavirus, but also into the future. So what we see here is that testing has been done on past coronaviruses, actually an extensive amount of testing, but new research has shown that UVC radiation may also be effective in inactivating the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is a virus that causes the coronavirus disease 2019, also known as COVID-19. Now, one of the reasons why the FDA hasn't gone behind this technology yet is just because of the slow lag time that is required for proper research to be done on this viral strain. As it says here, however, currently there's limited published data about the wavelength, dose, and duration of UVC radiation required to inactivate the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and that is up for debate. We have many different studies showing the efficacy against SARS-CoV-2 by UVC technology. It's just taken some time to get the peer-reviewed studies published, out, and inspected by these governmental groups. So now the FDA here is talking about a little bit about what we need to investigate. So in addition to understanding whether UVC radiation is effective at inactivating a particular virus, there are also limitations to how effective UVC radiation can be at inactivating viruses generally. A, direct exposure. UVC radiation can only inactivate a virus if the virus is directly exposed to the radiation. Therefore, the inactivation of viruses on surfaces may not be effective due to blocking of UV radiation by soil, such as dust or other contaminants such as bodily fluids. So part one here is a question that we get often is, will our custodial team need to go into the room and clean? Yes, and this is the standard cleaning that you'd be doing on a daily basis regardless. This is taking the pieces of paper that might have been dropped on the ground and putting them into the recycle bin. This is a general cleaning, so removing some of these surfaces because UV is light. Wherever the light touches is being disinfected. Now, this part right here is actually interesting, and it's, let's say, not 100% factual because COVID-19, the viral strain there, the SARS-CoV-2 viral strain, is what is called a airborne-mediated microbial disease. It is also what is called here a aerosol. And so what an aerosol is a tiny respiratory droplet that can remain suspended in the air. So it is covered by a tiny bubble of essentially water, and UVC light can penetrate it, especially those that are floating in the air. One of the things that makes UVC so special in this fight against SARS-CoV-2 is that a lot of these standard disinfection means using chemical products won't be able to get into the air. So when you have a whole room solution where the lights are in the ceiling or in a portable unit shining throughout the room, you'll get good coverage on that side. Next up, dose and duration. This is also incredibly important. Many of the UVC lamps sold for home use are of low dose, so it may take longer exposure to a given surface area to potentially provide effective inactivation of a bacteria or virus. If the light is not strong enough, it will not treat this disease. There needs to be enough energy. So if you are looking to implement UVC technology, which as mentioned already is going to be more effective than a lot of traditional means, it is incredibly important that you are using a powerful enough system. One of the ways to do that is to make sure you're working with a proper engineering-based company that can do proper calculations. We'll get a little bit more into that later on here. Okay, next up, UVC radiation is commonly used inside air ducts to disinfect the air. This is the safest way to employ UVC radiation because direct UVC exposure to human skin or eyes may cause injuries, and installation of UVC with an air duct is less likely to cause exposure to skin and eyes. Two things to unpack here. First off, let's get right into some of the the health issues here. Direct exposure of high-powered UVC light, especially for an extended period of time. And when we say UVC light, we're talking most different wavelengths. There's what's called 222 nanometers, which is new technology, which still does need a good amount of research behind it. But at the traditional 254 or other wavelengths that UVC light is emitted from, long-term exposure to skin will be very similar to standing under the sun for an extended amount of time. There can be some reddening of the skin, some irritation of the skin, same effect as getting sunburnt. Just as we don't look at the sun directly with our eyes, same thing here, we don't want to look directly at a light source. And so when we go into the New York Department of Education regulations, they keep on talking about UVC light only active when no one is in the room. That at Pure UVC, that's something that is incredibly important to us. We have many levels of safety to ensure that that is the case. Now, the second thing to unpack in this statement here is UVC radiation is commonly used inside air ducts to disinfect the air. Yes, this is true. Another common application, another historically common application is inside of water treatment facilities. Now, the one issue here is that, yes, it's safe because no one is exposed to it, but it's also not the most efficacious because only a limited amount of air flows into the ducts themselves. And because of the added weight of those aerosolized, contaminated air particles, it takes a lot to get them into those ducts to be treated. And so in that case, again, a whole room treatment plan where you have either in ceiling or a portable unit is going to be much more efficacious there. Now, I'm not saying don't put into your HVAC system. It's a fantastic thing to do, but it's not going to be an end all. And research has shown that it only will treat maybe about 30% of those pathogens. So getting back to that first point, there have been reports of skin and eye burns resulting from improper installation of UVC lamps in rooms that humans can occupy. Again, improper installation. Very, very important to have a proper system with proper safety protocols. Now, question that's being arose here. Can UVB or UVA radiation inactivate the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus? So before we get too into this answer, let me give you a little bit of a background. I'm not going to dive too much into it. If you want to learn more, we have a webinar where we go into a deep dive of UVC technology and UVC science. We'll talk about the different wavelengths there. But to give a general idea, 3 major wavelengths of UV: UVA, UVB, UVC. UVA is naturally emitted from the sun, as UVB and UVC, but UVA moves through the ozone layer quite readily and is the UV which is the most common on the planet. UVA is responsible for our suntans. UVB also comes from the sun. About 5% passes through the ozone layer of what comes from the sun. And this, as we find out, is very dangerous. It's what causes skin burns. It's what eventually causes skin cancer. UVC is emitted from the sun as well. It's completely filtered from the ozone layer, but using special fixtures, it can be produced here on planet Earth, and it has special properties that make it incredibly potent at pathogenetic disinfection. So going in here, UVB, again, skin burns, skin cancer. There's some evidence that UVB radiation is effective at inactivating other SARS viruses, not SARS-CoV-2. However, it is less effective than UVC at doing so, and is more hazardous in humans than UVC radiation because UVB radiation can penetrate deeper into the skin and eye. UVB is known to cause DNA damage and is a risk factor in developing skin cancer and cataracts. So again, the UV light that's emanating from the sun, from the UV light that you get from your beach days, is actually more dangerous than the systems that we would be putting into your schools or your facilities. Then here, UVA. UVA radiation is less hazardous than UVB radiation, but it's also significantly less effective than either UVB or UVC radiation at inactivating other SARS viruses, approximately 1,000 times less. UVA is also implicated in skin aging and risk of skin cancer. So one thing that you may have noticed is that in the summer, the transmission of coronavirus has gone down. Part of it is because the planet is tilted a little bit closer to the sun, and a little more UV light is being filtered through. In addition, we have longer days, meaning more UV light comes onto the planet. So there is a natural treatment outside against this. It's also another reason why outdoor dining is allowed, and why being outside is a lot less hazardous than being inside for the transmission of this disease. Continuing on here is it safe to use a UVC lamp for disinfection purposes at home? Before we even go into this, I'm just going to chime in here. It's something that I would be very wary of to put in home. Most residential applications are not as let's say, regulated or as robust as commercial and industrial solutions. So if you're buying a cheap unit off of Amazon, please be aware there are many health risks that can come with it, and we'll go through some in just a brief moment. So risks: UVC lamps used for disinfection purposes may pose potential health and safety risks depending on the UVC wavelength, dose, and duration of radiation exposure. The risk may increase if the unit is not installed properly or used by untrained individuals. Some of these risks, what they include. Okay, as we mentioned before, direct exposure of skin and eyes to UVC radiation, right? Next up, some UVC lamps generate ozone. Ozone inhalation can be irritating to the airway. So many UVC lamps that you're getting at a budget produce UV light at the 180 to 185 nanometer range. This produces ozone. Ozone itself is something that is incredibly toxic to the respiratory system. It's something that you want to make sure that you're not exposed to. If, for whatever reason, you are using a lamp that does produce ozone, it is incredibly important that you give time for the ozone to dissipate. That can take somewhere between an hour to multiple hours. So at Pure UVC, we make sure all of our lights are strictly at 254 nanometers. We have some special safety regulations inside of the lamps themselves to make sure of that. Next up, UVC can degrade certain materials such as plastic polymers and dyed textile. This is true when implementing for some items. It does make sense to go and investigate. This is information that we'll be happy to provide, some of the common plastics and polymers. The nice part is that most modern plastics, polymers, textiles, flooring does come with UV protection built into it. Because again, UV protection is going to be against sunlight. Some of this degradation that you might see is if you think about an old computer monitor, that especially one that might be next to a window, how after a long time it gets that little bit of a yellowish tinge. That's because of the UV light. So again, certain coatings can go on to protect. And it's also a thing where if you do have important but susceptible materials, talk with us and we can arrange the system in a way that they're not going to get impacted. And then here, some UVC lamps contain mercury. Because mercury is toxic even in small amounts, extreme caution is needed in cleaning a lamp that has broken and in disposing of the lamp. UVC lamps that utilize mercury are essentially the same exact technology as fluorescent lamps. Some of you may still have fluorescent lamps in your schools or your facilities, and even if you don't, you very likely remember when you were using that technology. Same exact idea. It's actually interesting where the fluorescent lamps that you were using had a very thin layer of a special paint that blocked the UV light from penetrating through. So in that case, this is something to be aware of. If there is, for whatever reason, a breakage of lamps, evacuate the space, allow a little bit of time for the space to aerate, wear the mask that you are wearing normally, and just dry brush your material, throw it away, and wipe down that area as well. For further instructions, we'll be happy to provide. We do protect our lamps as well as possible to avoid that. And that actually has not been an issue that we've seen, but it is good to know of all precautions. All right, effectiveness. The effectiveness of UVC lamps in inactivating the SARS-CoV-2 virus is unknown because there is limited published data about the wavelength, dose, and duration of UVC radiation required to inactivate the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So there actually has been a large amount of research that has determined wavelength, dose, and duration. That has come out. It takes about up to 22 microjoules per centimeter or per square centimeter. And so what that means is that, again, you need to have a properly calibrated system. A proper engineer and firm that specializes in this can provide that for you. It is important to recognize that generally UVC cannot inactivate a virus or bacterium if it is not directly exposed to UVC. In other words, the virus or bacterium will not be inactivated if it is covered by dust or soil, embedded in porous surface, or on the underside of a surface. So where the light touches is going to be disinfected. This is part of the solution, just as your chemical disinfectants and wiping down surfaces and washing your hands and wearing your masks is part of the solution. There is one very nice aspect here, is that inside of a room, there is natural air flow and air circulation. And I'm not even talking about goes through the air ducts, but inside of the room itself. And so by having a UV light beam, you're going to be essentially getting all that air that's filtering through the room. So though you may not get the underside of a desk, the actual surface, you will be getting the air that flows underside of that desk. And now this next part is actually really, really important. So to learn more about a specific UVC lamp, you may want to A, ask the manufacturer about the product's health and safety risks and about the availability of instructions for use/training information. This part, use and training, very important. First, to understand how to use the systems properly, and two, to have proper safety precautions built in. Pure UVC permanent install fixtures have more than 5 levels of safety precautions, including high-end occupancy sensors that will ensure no occupants are in a direct beam of light. The light will turn off if occupancy is detected. Ask whether the product generates ozone. It's very recommended to avoid the UVC lights that generate ozone unless special safety precautions can be taken. In a high traffic facility like a school, best bet is to avoid this altogether. Ask what kind of material is compatible with UVC disinfection. We mentioned that before. It's a great question to ask. We'll be very happy to answer that question. Again, most modern materials have built-in UV protection. Ask whether the lamp contains mercury. This information may be helpful if the lamp is damaged and if you need to know how to clean up and or dispose of the lamp. We can provide that information for you. Most of our lamps, they do contain a small amount of mercury. They are the low pressure mercury systems. We'll go through in a little bit about some of the different types of lamps that are out there. These tend to be the most affordable and most efficacious on the market at the time. Are all lamps that produce UVC radiation the same? Straight up, no, that's not the case. So not all UVC lamps are the same. Lamps may emit very specific UVC wavelengths like 254 or 222 nanometers. Again, explore our webinar, a deep dive into the technology of UVC. We go into that. Or they may emit a broad range of UV wavelengths. Some lamps also emit visible and infrared radiation. And when they say radiation, they just mean energy that's emitted. That's what radiation means there. And here, the wavelengths emitted by the lamp may affect the lamp's effectiveness at inactivating a virus. 254 nanometer is right in the range of the most efficacious for treating pathogens. It's where that treatment ability that UVC has is at its highest. And then here, testing out of the lamp can determine whether and how much other wavelengths the lamp puts out. We do rigorous testing. We keep it at 254, and we go and check the microjoule output, meaning how much power is being generated, how much light is being generated from our lamps, so we can go and provide you timetables of how long the system needs to be on in order to treat. Now, we'll talk about this in a few moments. There's a section below, as you'll see, where different types of UVC technology is out. So question, what are the different types of lamps that can produce UVC radiation? Low pressure mercury lamp, that is what we use, Pure UVC. We are always looking at different technologies, so we are working with a few eczema concepts right now, and we are looking for the day that LED becomes a viable solution. Here, the low pressure mercury lamp. Historically, the most common type of lamp used to produce UVC radiation was the low pressure mercury lamp. It still is, not was, which has its main emission at 254 nanometer. Ours stays here because it is specially designed in order to keep at this range. Exactly there. Okay, next up, Eczema Lamp or Far UVC lamp. So this is an exciting new technology that is being researched and developed. It's not something that there has been sufficient research for. This actually research has begun within the past year. And if the research continues to show what it has been showing, it is very exciting because the 222 nanometer range is currently showing promise to be able to be on throughout occupancy, because what it's showing is that it can't penetrate through the few layers of dead skin cells that we have on our on the outside layer of our skin, and therefore can't cause any damage. Same goes with our eyes as well. However, again, as it says right up here, long-term safety data is lacking. So this is a technology that we are very, very keenly keeping our eyes on, and we hope that there's a day where we can safely introduce this technology for schools and other high-traffic facilities. Pulsed xenon lamps. So this is a technology that has historically been used in hospitals after surgical rooms are unoccupied. Where these lamps, which emit a short pulse of broad spectrum, including UV, visible infrared light, have been filtered to emit mainly UVC radiation and are sometimes employed in hospital settings to treat environmental surfaces in operating rooms or other spaces. These are normally employed when no humans are occupying the space. One of the major reasons why is because it emits a broad wavelength of light, meaning it does produce ozone and it does produce a few other byproducts. So it is not human safe at all. It's not human safe when it's on. It's not human safe right when it turns off, unlike a 254 nanometer lamp, where the second it's off, it's safe to enter the room. And finally, we mentioned how essentially the UV lamps are fluorescent. So the next question then is, okay, I know that for my standard lighting, that LED has replaced fluorescent. What about UV LEDs? So LEDs, light-emitting diodes that produce UV radiation, are also becoming more commonly available. Typically, LEDs emit a very narrow wavelength band of radiation. Currently available, peak wavelengths at 214, 265, 273 nanometers. One advantage of LEDs is that they contain no mercury. However, the small surface area and higher directionality of LEDs may make them less effective for germicidal applications. So, coming from an engineering firm, what we found with LEDs is, yes, what it says here, but in addition, and let's say more importantly, two other items. One, they are not able to generate enough power in order to treat a whole room. Two, they are prohibitively expensive. Hopefully the UV LED revolution happens. Hopefully more research is done and viable solutions are built in. The nice part with LEDs is that when they do become viable, it is as simple as replacing existing bulbs in your current pure UVC solutions with LED. And then the FDA guidelines here give some more reading on different studies regarding UVC. If you want even more than this, please reach out to us, but this is a fantastic place to get started. Now, I'm not going to read through the whole the whole rigmarole here, but what is the FDA's role in oversight of the UVC lamp? So there are medical grade UVC lamps which are used in order to treat and to reduce, to treat in medical facilities and to treat on the body. Ours are not medical grade, so that is not one of the things that FDA is currently investigating there. So it says here, ultraviolet lamps intended for medical purposes, such as products that disinfect other medical devices or irradiate part of the human body that meet the definition of medical device, require FDA clearance, right? So that's not in the case here. When a UVC lamp is regulated only as an electronic product, there are currently no specific FDA performance standards that apply. So the FDA is giving recommendations saying, hey, this is great technology, research has shown it, but the FDA does not regulate here. Now, the next question then is, okay, the FDA, but I've also heard about the EPA. Consumers who are interested in learning more about the EPA's role may want to see the EPA page. Why aren't ozone generators, UV, or air purifiers on list N? Can I use them to kill the COVID-19? So the short answer here, as you read through, is that unlike these are examples of pesticidal devices. A pesticidal device is an instrument or other machine that is used to destroy, repel, trap, or mitigate any pests, including bacteria and viruses. Unlike chemical pesticides, EPA does not routinely review the safety or efficacy of pesticidal devices, and therefore cannot confirm whether or under what circumstances such products may be effective against SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. Accordingly, List N only includes surface disinfectants registered by the EPA and does not include devices. So when you're looking at that List N and you're trying to find what chemical cleaners you can use, the reason why UV light isn't there is because they are only providing chemical cleaners, even though UVC light is shown to be effective against coronavirus. Though that said, it is highly important that you are getting products that are EPA registered. Everything that Pure UVC sells is made in EPA registered facilities, meaning that they do follow the guidelines for pesticidal devices. Now, a quick little aside, snarky little fun fact here. The claim kills SARS-CoV-2 may be true and not misleading where a device has been tested against the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 refers to a virus, COVID-19 refers to a disease, and diseases cannot be killed. Therefore, the claim kills COVID-19 is always considered false and misleading. This statement is actually false and misleading as well because a virus is not a living entity. Being that's not a living entity, it can't be killed. So treated against, disabled, rendered inert would be the more proper ways of explaining this. Excuse my snark right there, but wanted to go and be as straightforward as possible. And now finally, let's dive into the positive repercussions of these new FDA regulations and guidelines. And that is school boards applying these. So FAQ number 12 revised. So previously the New York Department of Education was putting this technology on temporary hold. What else is nice about the New York Department of Education providing the green light for this technology, as you'll see in a few moments, the FDA providing green light for this technology, is that there may be funding opportunities that are coming that we're waiting on FDA approval. Now, that's something that we'll keep our eye on. If there's any updates that any of you discover, please let us know. But it is a very positive, it's a very positive movement for all of us who are looking to consider implementing this technology. So we have different types of cleaners right here, which can generate ozone. Remember that right there. And for this reason, SED working with Department of Health is not recommending it at this time. Such technology is being marketed heavily. Please be cautious. The marketing literature does not discuss the byproducts of ionization, right? Please be careful. Here at Pure UVC, we are happy to answer all of your nitty-gritty questions. We understand, especially if you're a school, especially if you're an office, especially if you're a high-traffic facility, that as important as keeping your facility safe is bringing in confidence in your facility. So we want to make sure that we can answer any questions so you can feel confident using the system before you implement it for your occupants. Now let's dive into what they recommend for UV light. So UV light is permitted only in central system air handling units, AHUs, and for lighting in spaces such as the nurse's office or isolation room for use only when the space is unoccupied and only with appropriate safety measures. e.g. safety switches that automatically turn off the UV light when an AHU access door is open or when occupants are sensed entering a space. That will prevent unintended UV light exposure to workers. Students and staff shall not be exposed to UV, UVA, UVB, UVC, or UVC, or any UV light due to the known risk of damage to eyes and skin. Hence, UV lights in spaces shall not be permitted to operate when the space is occupied. So, two things here. One is that there needs to be a properly calibrated system. We'll dive into that in 2 seconds. Second, and excuse the snark here again, but students and staff shall not be exposed to UV, UVA, UVB. That does come naturally from the sun. That is part of sunlight right there. So unfortunately, students will be, but not from any of these devices. So before we go into our safety protocols to match this, link once again to the FDA and the ASHRAE safety precautions and regulations are listed here. If you're looking for a very, very deep dive, a very deep exploration of some of this technology, I definitely recommend reading it. It is technical, but definitely very interesting as well. So let's get back to the Pure UVC website as we start to move towards the ending of this webinar. So if you go to IntelliSafe Controls right here, this is our proprietary control system that is built into our fixed install systems. And what this is an app-based system that provides the safety features that are being sought out. Smart sensors. In-fixture smart sensors detect occupants approaching the treatment area and automatically disengage operation of UVC fixtures while occupancy is detected. That is exactly what was asked here, right? So when occupants are sensed entering a space, right, it's turning off the lights right there. Now, in addition to that, we do have audible activations. So this is the fixtures having an audible sound when they're on. So students and occupants know not to enter into the area. Astronomic clock, which means that you can program the fixtures to a proper duration so that they can run for the amount of time that are needed, while of course having the smart sensors turn off the systems if need be. Manual override, you can turn the system off at any point if you need to. And we have an extra level of safety built in where if there's any discrepancy detected in the fixture, in the programming, in the sensors, fixtures will turn off, they'll remain off until remedied. And now, in addition to that, what is nice about this type of system is that it allows for a certain flexibility as well. So app-based controls, so you don't need any fancy controllers, just use your Apple iPhone or your Android-based phone. Preloaded customized presets, which means that preloaded into the app is going to be your nightly disinfection. It's going to be your disinfection between periods if you so want to do that. And whatever type of disinfection you need, because it can be customized as well. And of course, everything is rigorously tested, as was mentioned in the FDA article, as was mentioned in the New York Department of Education protocols as well. So we'll conclude the webinar right there. I hope that answered some questions about what the FDA was mandating there. I hope it answered some questions about how to apply this in schools. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to contact us. We'd be happy to provide more information. We'd be happy to have conversations, even if it's questions just about UVC technology. We do believe in this technology, and we want to make sure that your facilities are as safe as possible in the time of COVID-19 and in the future as well. So on behalf of Pure UVC, thank you for joining me today. Stay safe, everyone, and be well.